and we'll start with the roll call.
All right, thank you, Linda Diane. I will now call the roll of the Transportation Commission. I did receive regrets from the following commissioners who are not able to join us this evening. Commissioner Kyra Sims, Sergeant Bill Clark, and Commissioner Steve Dolan. I will call the roll now. Please say here when your name is called. Commissioner Boland,
Here.
Commissioner Felt,
Here.
Commissioner Fern, Commissioner Gordon,
Here.
Councilmember Griswold,
Here.
Commissioner Hull,
Here.
Commissioner Kleinman,
Here.
Commissioner Parsons,
Here.
Tim Sanderson as an alternate for Kyra Sims,
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau,
Here.
Commissioner Hess,
Here.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Here.
Commissioner Margolis,
Here.
Commissioner Webb.
Here.
We have a quorum.
That's great. I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda unless there's any objections to minutes or anything. All right. Commissioner Trudeau, seconded by Wyman. You beat him. Great. All right. Say aye if you approve. Aye. Any opposing? Any abstentions? All right, we have minutes and an agenda. And then at this time, we will take public comment, and you have 3 minutes timed by Kayla. Looks like you're it.
Hi, good evening again. My name's Clark Chernesky, and tonight I want to discuss a problem. There's good train service between Ann Arbor and Chicago 3 times a day. Actually, Detroit, Ann Arbor, Chicago. There's good train service between Windsor, Ontario, and Toronto 4 times a day. The problem is trying to get from here to Toronto, for example. If you go to Windsor Station, look at the cars parked there, about half the cars are from the state of Michigan. So there's a need to get to that station if you live in Michigan. And so there was a group of about 6 of us from the Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers decided to look into it and see if we can do something about it. It might be a while before you can get train service, and train service is starting to be talked about a little more than in the past, but it takes a while to do that. So what we proposed is something we're calling the Windsor Connector. And it's kind of like Air Ride is for trains. So instead of going from Ann Arbor by motor coach to Metro Airport, we go to Windsor. For example, there would be 2 departures, one early morning and one late morning by bus from here to Metro Detroit area, stopping in Dearborn and Detroit, and going to Windsor to connect with about a half-hour cushion with the trains to Toronto, 2 of the trains to Toronto. Likewise, there'd be you take the train from Toronto, leave in the late afternoon, take that to Windsor, get on the bus, it'll take you to Ann Arbor. Also, there'd be, that bus would sometimes just go between Detroit and Windsor for cases where you can take the train, the Chicago, Ann Arbor, Detroit train to Detroit, then transfer by that bus, by the Windsor Connector to Windsor Station and go to Toronto, and likewise going in the other direction. So this is something that looks like it could be implemented rather simply, and the schedule works out that you can do that with 1 bus and 2 drivers. So it would be an efficient way of doing that as well. And I gave you a kind of a synopsis of this in the handout. And on the back is a suggested schedule. This is an idea of how this could be implemented. And we're not asking for any money, not from you guys anyway. But I just wanted to let you know about this and have your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak? All right. The next item on the agenda, I reserved a bit of time to talk a little bit about the future membership of the commission. And this is an item that is a bit in flux. And my suggestion is that if you have a comment or reaction to it, that you save that until the end of the meeting during the time that we usually have communications from commissioners, rather than discussing it at this point. But I wanted to let you know that the future of a few of our members is at question. I received a communication from the mayor, it's been about 4 weeks ago, I guess, that the reappointments of myself, Robert Gordon, and then Scott Trudeau were being opposed by city council. And the process is that you submit for reappointment, and the mayor makes those recommendations, and that was presented to city council a week ago last Monday, just 9 days ago. And then there's a vote on the 20th. And at this point, it's not entirely clear what's going to happen, but that opposition still exists. And so, as a commissioner of this body, we have the option of remaining for up to 60 days if no one is appointed in our place. And with Scott's position, he is appointed through the planning department, the planning commission, and he could remain up to 90 days. No?
Indefinitely.
Oh, definitely, okay. Even if he's not reappointed to the planning commission, as long as that position is vacant. So we don't know if this is the last meeting or what for the three of us. So I wanted to let you know that, and we can, we'll know as of Monday a little bit more about what will happen. But it is potentially possible that you'll lose both the chair and the vice chair at this point as well. So it's been a very weird couple of weeks dealing with that. And I'll just mention also that in the process, I discovered that our communications with anyone regarding commission member activities are also completely FOIA-able. And we've also had FOIA requests filed for our emails concerning the reappointment process. All three of us. And also Julie Weatherby on the Planning Commission is part of the 4 people who the mayor indicated do not have support. All right, so there's that. So if you want to say more at the end of the meeting, feel free. So we're going to have a presentation by the Regional Transit Authority. Matt? And we have 20 minutes for this.
Okay, great. Thank you and good evening. Thank you for the invitation to present about activities with the Regional Transit Authority. So my name is Matt Webb, and I guess I've been remiss of my commissioner duties, but we'll see if I can do better in the future. But I've been with the Regional Transit Authority now for a little over a year, and we've have several activities in the works. I'm going to walk through some highlights of those. Before I get started, I just wanted to point out in your homework packet, actually an error that Tim pointed out to me today about our regional ridership characteristics. So this is a work in progress document that we are in the process of updating our regional transit master plan. And I'll talk more about some of those activities. But this represents sort of the state of the system chapter. And it's our first draft. We rolled it out at our board retreat last week. In it, it says we have a focus on people and how people use the existing transit systems and how they get around our region. One area as far as the AAATA, the annual ridership number is significantly lower than what actually the ride does provide, and so I want to clarify that and correct that. It's should be more like 6,713,605 fixed routes and 152,169 passenger boardings for paratransit service, so significantly more than what we've captured within this document. It is a draft work in progress, and thank you, Tim, for those comments. I always like to start my presentations with a little bit about what the RTA is, what the RTA isn't. So we are an umbrella organization formed by state statute. We are not a service provider. We don't necessarily intend to be a service provider, but really our mission is to seek ways to enhance mobility, to bring in more investment to the region so that we can improve our quality of life, increase mobility options, and ultimately contribute to the overall economic viability of the region. And so we have a couple of core functions given to us by state statute. One is that we are the planning body for the 4-county region, Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, and Washtenaw. We are also the federally designated recipient for federal and state dollars coming to the region. So we go through an annual allocation process where we distribute those funds to our transit partners. And then we administer a series of regional programs. And so, on that list is we are not actively providing service. We partner with AAATA, SMART, DDOT to provide those services. And so what we've been trying to do is find ways that we can provide additional value both to our provider partners as well as additional revenue to the region. So our core priorities for 2019, I'm going to run through a few of them and then highlight two in particular that is really like to highlight tonight. So as I said, we are the body that's responsible for developing a regional plan. Our last plan that was officially adopted was 2016. As you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, we narrowly were defeated in 2016. And we've been out listening and trying to build on some of the successes of that program. We've tried to listen and improve what we heard back with feedback as far as some of the things that didn't work well. And we've also been looking at how we plan for longer term being 20 years and beyond. And so I'll talk more about some of the things we have going on with that, but that's really, we had an effort last year with the Connect Southeast Michigan plan. We weren't successful of getting on the ballot and having that as an adopted plan, but we've, again, taking lessons learned from that. The next thing is we actually just put out a RFP and got proposals back this week. We're going to be developing a coordinated human services plan for the entire 4-county region. Right now, each agency has their own coordinated human services plan for paratransit and ADA services. So we're going to bring all that under one umbrella, try to help with better coordination of services across the entire 4-county region. Along the same lines of paratransit and ADA trips, we developed a partnership and received about $1 million of state funding last year through the Michigan Mobility Challenge Grant. We're working with our providers to develop a mobile booking app to make booking trips for seniors and paratransit trips much more much more feasible, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're just kicked off a mobility-oriented development study where we're looking at the interface of land use and mobility and mobility options and mobility providers, where they intersect along two major corridors. One is Woodward. The other one is the potential rail corridor from Ann Arbor to Detroit, especially around stations and station planning and how we better prepare and plan for new mobility options that are either here today or coming in the future, and then provide sort of recommendations and framework for not only our public transit providers and private providers, but also the corresponding land use side and working with the local governments. We are in the process of also pursuing legislation. One of the things as far as implementing the regional master plan we found over the last several years is that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work well for the 4 counties. What transit and mobility looks like in northern Macomb, northern Oakland, very different from the southern parts of those counties, very different from downtown Detroit, Wayne, very different here in Washtenaw County as far as western and southern Washtenaw to the city of Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti, and the more dense areas. So what we are looking at is trying to move some legislation forward that would allow us, I describe it as an additional tool in our toolbox. We would still have the same provisions of our enabling statute for a full 4-county region, but then we would have the ability to move forward and potentially implement a smaller taxing footprint if that is the desire of our county partners moving forward. So that has definitely been a priority. We're working on implementing a pilot project with SMART and M1 Rail regarding data integration and big data, harnessing big data. And so we're working with a data company to improve not only the public facing next bus arrival systems, but also sort of the back room and operations, and being able to take the tremendous amount of data that we receive from our public transit providers and use that to harness and identify specific routes or capital plans where we can identify and develop speed maps and identify bottlenecks for transit service and look at capital projects to help improve those. And then lastly, we're looking at trying to find and secure funding for regional pilot projects for both new mobility services, as well as potentially looking at a pilot project that would provide commuter express and some of the other elements that we've outlined in the plan, trying to identify funding that would allow us to implement those on a year-to-year basis until we get more of a sustained regional funding stream. A quick overview of the master plan. So we have taken all the feedback we heard in 16, all the feedback that we've received in 2018, and feel that we have a much better understanding of sort of the regional mobility needs. And a couple of those specifically that we heard last year is that there is strong support in the region for more investment in transit, but that one-size-fits-all model does not work. And so we are pursuing the legislation and to try to address that concern. The other thing that we've heard is that it's hard to implement new service without protecting the existing services that are provided by AAATA, SMART, and DDOT. And so everything that we've assumed as far as the RTA plan has always been layered on top of the existing provider service. What happens if you have a situation where that, for example, Macomb County, the SMART millage renewal passed by 43 votes. If that wouldn't have passed, then we wouldn't have even been able to add on the additional services that we're talking about. So that's been a key consideration that we're working with all the transit providers and trying to identify a sustainable, long-term funding source to make sure that we can implement not only the services they offer today, but expanded services as well. We've heard loud and clear that we need to be flexible in looking at new mobility services, connected and autonomous, and all the research that is going on. And so when we're looking at a 20-year plan, 20-year vision, we need to be responsive to having the ability to modify the plan as we move forward. And then the other thing is, from 2016, what we heard was probably we focused too much on capital investment and not enough on service. And so there's a strong emphasis on improving service in the regional plan. So we're in the process of addressing all those concerns. We've been updating documents. We intend to have a draft master plan out, and we're going to move forward with some of our investment priorities here in June and July. Ultimately, we'll have a full plan in 2019. And one of the other elements that I think is very important is that we focus on the people, and that we've talked a lot about service, types of service in our last plans. Who's going to provide that service? And we've gotten down to nitty-gritty conversations about how everything's going to be delivered. But what in my opinion, we've failed to do is we've left the people and the purpose behind the Regional Transit Authority behind. And so what we're proposing is to move forward with a vision that looks at moving the region's people, our region's people, investing in our future, and that means not only new technologies, new mobility options, but also the human capital. What we've heard loud and clear is that our existing transit providers are challenged to maintain their current workforce. And so if we're going to be out putting additional service, where's the human capital going to come to deliver those services? So we need to have look at that as well. Enhancing the region's quality of life, and then connecting the region's communities where we don't have connections today. So that's really the principle of our vision. The other thing that's critical, in my opinion, is that the mobility is not defined by one provider. The state of mobility across the country, in our state, in our region, it requires a partnership, both with public and private providers. So, all the public providers coming together. The RTA has a very small role in that, and it's the intent of this plan as we move forward to try to define sort of the mobility environment and how we move forward. Ultimately, with that vision, with that partnership, the plan will identify sort of 8 investment priorities, ranging everything from local bus service today, rapid bus, airport service, rail service, additional system enhancements, new mobility services, additional investment in community transit and paratransit. ADA is a significant need in the region. And then the last piece, like I mentioned, is the workforce development. So this is the timeline for the plan. Ideally, we'd like to have the plan ready for our board adoption in September of 2019. Like I said, we'll be going out and looking at those investment priorities this summer, assembling those comments, and then ultimately assembling the full plan and going out for more outreach and engagement in September and October. The second piece that goes hand in hand in the plan is, so we've always treated the plan as sort of this 20-year, we're going to assume everything and plan everything and incorporate in it. I think where we fall down is, and what the board, my board has talked about, it's not the what. We all agree on what we need and the vision, but it's more the how and how we are going to implement that. And we always break down in how the program's going to be delivered. And so what we're proposing to do this time around is to look at developing a comprehensive improvement program every 5 years. It would be an annual program that gets adopted by the board that would identify investment priorities. And then we can use that as sort of the fiscally constrained document. We have the plan that will do more of the larger vision. And so we are also moving forward in that direction to put that in place. Next, just a few slides to highlight the mobile booking solution that we're working on. So this is a true partnership. Very excited about the potential outcome of this. We put this together in partnership with The Ride, SMART, DDOT, AAA1B, our area on aging, SEMCOG, and then also Menlo Innovations right here in Ann Arbor. We put this together to look at really to address a problem statement, and we started attacking this of, again, trying to identify a way that makes booking a trip much more easy. And we looked at this from a standpoint of, well, who are we doing this project for? And ultimately, everybody around the table said the riders. And as we got pushed and prodded a little bit more, we started looking at, well, there's also implications for the drivers, the schedulers, or dispatchers, the transit authorities themselves. And so we ultimately did sort of a persona map. We looked at identifying who is the primary person that we're trying to design this for. And everybody around the table, you know, we sat around and basically once we've mapped out sort of all the existing pain points, and we identified a primary persona for this project, and it's Carol Weather, 60-year-old paratransit rider for the last 8 years. Carol became blind after her heart condition worsened 6 years ago, and so she uses paratransit service, and she gets frustrated when no one at work tells her when that vehicle is ready there to pick her up. And so this was, we had several of these to choose from, but ultimately, again, this gets back to we're trying to provide solutions and add value for the people of our region. And so people like Carol, I'm excited. We've gone through and sort of mapped out all the different pain points from all the existing providers. You know, we have 3 providers. They each have different systems. We're trying to come together as a region and identify ultimately how we can make Carol's process of taking a trip to get to her job, to get home, a better solution. And so we're at the point now where we have 3 different design concepts. We're going to be running those through a series of sort of beta testing with different stakeholders that we've engaged. Ultimately, we hope to come out with one specified design. We'll take that to the market. Hope to have either an off-the-shelf solution or a modified solution, and we'll be able to deploy a pilot here within Washtenaw County at least by November. We'll be able to test that. Ultimately, this is sort of the type of project that we want to see more of this innovation, ultimately trying to push forward to make the people of our region provide better trips, better connectivity, and more mobility. So, a few highlights. Be happy to answer any questions that the commission has, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? We have a little bit of time. I guess it was thorough. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. The next agenda item is talking about the 6 E's. we've got lots of great staff comments. If each of the people who are working on those want to just briefly say something, we scheduled 15 minutes for this part. Or if you have questions about it, because I know you've all thoroughly read them. But thanks to the staff for some excellent points. That's about what I have to say about my part. I think it's a great conversation starter. So the other people who presented, what would you like to say?
And it may be helpful for each who prepared a report, even just to summarize a few main points of what you found. I know that we talked a bit about the reports last month, but I'm not sure that we really not that you have to formally present, and we know we made the materials available for everyone to read, but in case any commissioners didn't get a chance to read through all of the other e-reports, you might be able to highlight what you found in your research.
I can go first since I didn't go last time.
Yes.
My E was enforcement, and I had a very helpful meeting with Raymond and Sergeant Clock, where we talked a lot about the way enforcement works now in Ann Arbor, what the big pain points are. By far, the biggest challenge is staffing, as I understand it. So we're usually set up to have 6 traffic officers or traffic enforcement officers, and currently there are 3. And so that has really limited the AAPD's ability to do what it would normally do in terms of enforcement. And it sounds like staffing overall is sort of a larger, more chronic issue for the AAPD, and so I think this is probably going to continue to be a challenge. The other thing that so we talked about the existing programs. So we talked about the Changing Driver Behavior Study, which we all heard about a few months ago, I think. It was a partnership with the university, and really the sort of benefits and drawbacks of working with a university researcher to learn about our traffic issues, because on the one hand, they had the funding, but on the other hand, they got to do it the way they wanted and not necessarily the way we needed. So it was useful, but unlikely to be a continuing way to go about studying our traffic enforcement needs. And then I was really interested in the overlap, because it felt like enforcement had very clear connections with many of the other E's. And so I don't know if that's something that might make sense for us to talk about tonight, is sort of the ways that these overlap and what we can do to really build on those connections. So for example, around evaluation, metrics are difficult because we don't have a lot of crashes or fatalities. It's a very small data set. So there's not a lot of patterns that you can really draw. So I was curious about what other kinds of metrics we might want to gather and what those would look like. In terms of equity, a question that I have is whether we track enforcement by race. This is not something that came up in our meeting. Who's being stopped? Who's being ticketed? Are we looking at this by neighborhood? Are we looking at this data by age? What are the ways that we can break down this data in a way that would be useful for understanding equity? There are already strong lines of communication, it sounds like, between enforcement and engineering, but I'm always going to wonder if there are ways that we can improve those processes, make it more effective or efficient. And then for education, I read, was it you, Linda Diane, who did the education E? The real challenge of how to do that kind of education, and it doesn't sound like it has a clear home in the city structure the way engineering does. And so thinking about ways to build those connections, because enforcement and education, again, seem tightly linked. So that's what I've got.
Great, thank you. Yes.
We did a traffic stop review about 1.5 years ago, and I can forward that to the commission for its own reading and conclusions.
Thanks.
That'd be interesting. All right. I guess I could say for my part that, to me, the greater awareness of the E's and the education in particular helped to inform writing the resolution, which is coming up afterwards, which is that I didn't want to just reflect on what's our opinion of this, but actually suggest an educational component, which Kayla did a great job of further expanding from my initial resolution. So I think that that kind of action is actually most relevant in having the awareness of it and like, well, where can we put this? How can we overlap that? How can we look at these things holistically? So that's where it is for me.
I can speak a little bit to the equity segment that I wrote. And I tried to look a little bit deeper into some of I guess you could call them pilot projects, because all these cities are doing things that are pretty new. And I kept thinking, I think that this really is going to fit Vision Zero very well. And as we discussed there, and I'll echo from what I said before, that I think this is a really important E that's new, that's going to take multiple minds to figure out. I will also say that thank you very much to staff for their comments, and sort of a nuts and bolts question, like to put together a formal, a draft for approval. I'm hoping to just work with the one person or two people who crafted the recommended language, and we'll just iron that out, if that's okay.
Howard and then Tim.
Can I go back a step to enforcement? Sure. I remain unconvinced that the number of police officers is really the parameter for enforcement. I think in many ways it's an engineering analysis to figure out whether, to understand really what the compliance rate is before we start allocating resources to more police. I think every community is different. Using standard national models for how many police officers you should have is not necessarily the good model. So without commenting on whether we do or don't need more police, I'm not sure the case has been made to be 100% honest about it. Because it has such a large budgetary impact, I think one of the things in talking to Deputy Chief Forsberg is we need to do a better job of data analytics before we accept the conclusion from the police department that they need more police officers.
I think that's exactly right, honestly. I asked Sergeant Clark, what does he see as the biggest challenges, and that was staffing was the one that he named. We do have some other challenges because, for example, Michigan state law prohibits many of the automated kinds of enforcement that have been successful in other places. So we can't have red light cameras. We can't have automated speed cameras. So not that we necessarily need those either, but that that there's sort of that there are other limitations that are external to the city to be aware of, I guess.
We do have an effective policy agenda at the state level, and if the use of some of those devices, I think, provide a valuable analytical function without a ticketing function, I think there's some opportunity in daylight to address that with our legislative delegation. We're fortunate that we're not as financially stressed as many other municipalities, but if that kind of analytical tool is valuable without it issuing tickets, I think there's an opportunity to revisit that.
I think that sounds like it'd be really valuable. At this point, enforcement is largely driven by complaints. And it sounds like a lot of those complaints aren't actually borne out by data, but it'd be great to figure out if we have other points maybe where there's nobody complaining, but the data would.
I do appreciate the critical eye you've had on it. I'm just unconvinced right now when you look at the trade-off of things that we try and provide in the suite of services that more police are necessary. I'm not ruling it out, but I'm also not saying it's a cure-all.
Point taken.
Yeah, so I took equity, and it turns out we had two take equity, but we took very different takes on it. I took equity as in like mode of transportation, though I did have a little bit of a thought of as far as different demographic, socioeconomic, and like ability, disability groups in my thinking. But yeah, my thinking was essentially how a lot of our transportation planning is oriented around the effects on cars, using the level of service example that, and mentioning that while we have these level of service requirements, we don't have comparable requirements for non-motorized access, and we have like examples like I gave the Washtenaw and Pittsfield intersection across the street from Arborland, where you have to cross 3 times to get across the one street, and we have lights that you press a button and wait a long time. And I also brought up how the land use also like tends to favor parking and sometimes produces pedestrian hostile environments. And I touched a little more on demographics, on how the transit system often favors people who are commuting to or from downtown and commuting during peak daytime hours, and how anyone who isn't going during those times is disadvantaged by it. I mean, and yeah, and how that can be definitely like lower income and people working like night shifts and stuff like that are affected. And yeah, a few things I've mentioned is looking at replacing or augmenting level of service with other metrics so we can actually look at moving people rather than moving cars. And looking also construction projects, I did mention that as well, that construction projects, sometimes pedestrian access may not be maintained, but vehicle access is, and that can be a problem for people on foot. And also the whole thing about sidewalks and snow removal versus streets, how we fund them and how the results are varied because of that. And I said, yeah, we should look at the construction projects and how we do them and level of service. And I also mentioned about zoning, looking at revisiting things like parking minimums and setbacks and to make something that's more pedestrian friendly, and also looking at our transit network and what we can do there. I know obviously there's the issue of funds for all of this, but looking at if we could better allocate things. And I mean, I know there's trade-offs there, but so that's basically what I did. And
Great, thank you very much. I think it brought up a lot of issues that fall through the cracks. We're about out of time for this, if there's any other important discussion items to mention. Yeah.
I didn't have an E. I might propose a 7th E, which is effectiveness, which may also live under evaluation. But I was just, I'll share this with the commission later, but I did come across recently, NIOSH has a hierarchy of controls, which is a way of categorizing strategies to improve safety. And NIOSH is a National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, I think. So the hierarchy of controls sort of gives you a guideline of what's likely to be the most and least effective strategies when you're trying to improve the safety of a system. And so I think our transportation system, or is the system we're trying to improve the safety of. And so just as a preview, from the most effective to least effective, or actually I'll start with least effective to most effective. At the bottom of the hierarchy is personal protective equipment. Is the least effective way to improve the safety of the system, and then moving up from there is changing the process or changing behavior. Then engineering, which is isolating people from the hazard. Substitution, which is replacing the hazard, and then elimination, which is removing the hazard. So the most effective way to make a system safer is to remove the hazard, and then, and the least effective way is equipment. So you could take those things and put them into every E and kind of see which things are more likely and less likely to actually have a big impact through that model of thinking. I just wanted to share that because I thought it was interesting and kind of relevant, and also started with an E.
Great. I think, yes.
I still don't fully understand how we're using the E's. So I guess that's more of a statement than a question. But like, what are we doing with them now that we've done these reports?
The next step?
Yeah.
is that the city staff has come up with a possible template so that they can be compared more readily to each other. Because they're fairly different styles right now. And then bringing them back until it becomes more obvious what to do.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think that that's settled
So
even at this point.
eventually there'll be sort of a blueprint for action, is that the idea? I'm still not sure also whether the primary goal is kind of brainstorming and getting us thinking about these different facets, or if it's to develop an actual plan.
Frankly, it was to bring it up and see what happened. And I think that developing an actual plan or pulling out some of the top priorities is beginning to settle out.
Well, and the opportunity that staff has offered up before is that we're doing the transportation plan, and so this can be an input into that process. And what that input looks like is largely at your discretion. So if you want to take the opportunity to kind of, redraft or try to bring some commonality to the language, or at least similar bullet points, that's an opportunity. If you want to kind of give it to the consultant that's working on the transportation in kind of the form that it is now, for them to kind of mull over, that's another opportunity. And then, ultimately, this is your discussion, so whatever you want to do with it beyond that as well. But staff offers that up as something that is a target for possible inclusion of this work that you've done.
I would to add on what Raymond was saying, I think, so we prepared the template as a suggestion and an idea of where you could go next from here to, again, achieve some consistency across the reports because of the different styles. And some of them have touched on the different items that we've included in this template and some didn't. But then handing that off to the transportation plan consultant, they could incorporate that into the plan and some of those next steps ideas. So with Julie's question about whether this is just opening the discussion or is it framing an action plan, I think that the exercise was kind of both. It was an opportunity to open a discussion on these topics that have come up repeatedly, and it seemed like there had been some interest and excitement about wanting to dedicate time to talking about, but also by working through this template and even what you've already done in your report so far, you've started to identify where are we now, what is lacking, where do we want to go from here with these, so that we can shape the vision on these different E's and incorporate that in the transportation plan process, I would see as kind of the goal. So, but this is a suggestion, and I know that we're short on time, agenda time for this topic, but if there are any initial reactions or things that you liked or didn't like, or you want to agree to do differently with your template, or like Raymond said, if you want to hand over the reports as is and let the consultant try to work from those, that's an option as well. We're just we thought forming some consistency across the report might help to be more effective in the messages that you guys are trying to communicate. So really up to you where to go from here.
Maybe at the next meeting, we can spend some time talking about what we want to say to the transportation planner, using these as a framework for that.
So you want to, do you envision reformatting the reports and presenting those at the next meeting as the drafts of what you would relay on to the transportation plan?
Sure, and it may be
process?
that there are some specific key points from each of the 6 that we want to pull out into a sort of single overview as the big priorities that we see.
Yeah, maybe like an executive summary cover sheet, sort of
Right.
high level.
Right.
That would be great. I think that would be an effective way, and then you could still pass along the rest of the reports as well,
Yep.
but highlighting some main
Okay,
topic areas.
so each of the individuals can work on that and also then be distilled.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, good.
But certainly part of it is that this is a holistic way of thinking about transportation, and we need to be just having it in the front of our brains more. That was the main goal to start with.
So,
success.
one question, is the intent to, like, because some of this stuff may not be present in my current report, is the intent to go and find additional information to fill this in, or?
To the extent if it's readily available, but we're not trying to create a lot of extra work for you either. So if there are certain sections here in this template that don't apply for your E, or you just don't have the information readily available, then that's okay too. You can skip sections that aren't relevant.
All right? So I think we're clear? Good, thank you. And people don't have a copy of the template yet, right?
We did.
It was in the agenda
Wait, it's okay.
materials. Mhm.
I didn't run into it. Great, so the next agenda item, I believe, is that we voted to give a response to the city council regarding the resolution regarding community engagement and approval processes for city-related improvement projects. So what you have is a document which provides some background, most of which was supplied by Tim, and then some recommendations and specific resolution to forward to city council as our response to that. And so the question is, did the resolution capture the sense of the commission? We had asked a couple people to put that together, and although it's not part of the package, it seems like that they were quite consistent with what, the work that Tim did. So we can discuss this. I can also take a motion for these resolutions. We can also do some, we can see if we can do some editing if need be. But that, if it gets too extensive, then I'll suggest that that happen offline and then we vote again in June instead of today. What would you like to do? Well, if you're going to be quiet, then I'll just take a motion.
I have some potential minor edits.
Okay?
We limit the reason why, sorry, let me turn on my microphone. We limit the reason council might reject staff recommended road diet due to politics. It might be a variety of reasons. So I think we should be careful about just singling out like it's some sort of back and forth, saga going on, that there's a variety of reasons that it might be decided to not go forward.
Did you want us to?
Is that in the, that's not in the resolution itself?
Oh, it's in the whereases, sorry. I think there's two of them near the top.
Are you
yeah,
referring,
right
which
above
resolution are
recommendations.
you looking
Internal
at? The
politics.
The one
Is
that
this the one
council
on
passed?
community engagement, or is this the other one? I might have the wrong one up for you.
Brad, are you,
No, I think that's right.
are you referring to this thing, internal politics?
Yes.
Yeah,
community
it subjects
engagement.
decisions on safety to internal politics. I just don't really like that phrase. It's not just internal politics. It takes it out of the hands of experts. I can agree to that. We've
Yeah.
hired experts in this field to do what they think is best. It's not necessarily internal politics that's deciding.
Where is that?
Right above recommendations,
Okay,
Yeah, it's in the background section.
starts
So
with
that's-
given
that-
this.
okay.
so it's actually not part of the resolution, but it could still be,
Yeah,
Modified.
I'd like to temper that language personally. I can live with it as it is, but I recommend personally that we temper that.
Do you have an alternate wording?
To non-experts.
Non-experts, that's fine. To non-experts in the field.
okay, so you're talking about paragraph 1 or 2?
This is the wrong thing.
If you,
Probably paragraphs 1 and 4.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, it's up there too.
great, well, we can do that.
Oh, there it is.
I mean, if you want, Tim and I can make that change.
Yeah, that's, I mean, other than that minor point, I think this captures
Okay.
my feeling on the subject.
Okay. Then, would you like to move it?
Sure, I'll move
Okay,
for accepting the language.
with that modification to the background.
Or do you want me to move to vote for approval, continued discussion? I don't,
I think we're ready to roll it.
No, that's part of the motion. to
Okay.
modify the back, yes.
Sure.
Seconded by Molly?
Yep.
Okay. And we have discussion. I'd like to say something to start off with. I have great sympathy for city council representatives who hear from constituents who complain a great deal about particularly road diets and that kind of thing. And I do read the comments, and I read next door and see that it's fairly extensive. And that was certainly the motivation for me to put in the piece about education. And I also grew up believing in policy governance, and particularly when you have a city administrator, that the broader policy look by council is really critical, rather than the smaller looking at individual projects, and that's more of the staff purview. So in my mind, there's a very significant separation there. And having served on a number of boards and commissions and whatnot, it's something that just sort of creeps in, and you have to say, no, this is not appropriate. So that's my background in some of the assertion that, please, city council should be setting policy, and not specifically road by road. And in the road diet issue in particular, I was absolutely one of those people who thought that it was insane the first time I heard about it, which was, I think, 15 or 20 years ago on Jackson Road. And so I became convinced through the process of education that it was actually a brilliant idea, and I get more and more excited about it as I learn more and more about Vision Zero and look at the data. And that's why I think that doing this without a data package and educational materials is really hampering city council as well as city staff, who also have to deal with the complaints. So that's why I think I'm excited about this particular resolution. Other comments? Yes.
I'll just say, I also support this resolution, and for me, it comes down to the commitment to Vision Zero. In order to achieve Vision Zero, we need to be able to change the system, and if we're going to be taking a systemic look at how we make the entire system of getting around safer, but then we litigate every individual components or nodes of the system independently, then we'll fail, and that means lives. So I think setting the goals, setting the policy is important, and if we're serious about a policy of achieving nobody dying on our roads, then we should be empowering the city to really pursue that vision and drive toward those outcomes, and looking at the data. And then if we need to steer from a policy direction, I think that is totally fine. But I think making any individual change to the system up for debate when all of those components fit together is really going to hamper our ability to actually make the kind of progress we can make. So thank you for putting this together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just,
I saw Kathy's hand first.
oh, that's fine.
Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, yeah, I just was gonna comment that, yeah, I came up, just wanted to comment on this in part because I saw, I noticed that city council was talking about level of service and all. It's, objections to road diets that were listed in this resolution, and that know that a number of places like California are moving away from level of service because it only accounts for automobile traffic, and yeah, it really doesn't take into account anything else, and just feel like we need to be more forward-thinking than that, and yeah, it's also, yeah, the idea of Vision Zero, it's just seems like we need to be taking into account other factors, and we need to be, I do think, yeah, like, we need to trust the experts on staff, and with respect to road configurations. And the other thing is that this actually will only apply to lane reductions and not other changes in road configurations, which feel like if it was to be even-handed, it would apply to both, and it would not necessarily be, oh, road diets cause level of service problems. And I feel like that just shows an attitude among city council that level of service is all important.
All right, Kathy.
Yeah, one of the reasons that lane expansions are not addressed specifically is because council has to approve budgets, and a lane expansion is going to require a financial commitment, and so it would be coming to council. The other thing is, I am extremely upset, and have been for 10 years, about the lack of proper lighting in this community. We had a 10-year moratorium on lighting, and I begged this commission to address illumination and proper lighting. And we need to be data-driven. We seem to pick Vision Zero and just use a piece of it for whatever we're advancing. We need to look at it comprehensively. And I've been looking at crash data for the last 10 years. And our crash data shows that pedestrian crashes are going up. They were 56 in 2017, 59 in 2018, and we are on track for over 70 pedestrian crashes this year. This is a crisis for me, and I sure hope that this commission takes that seriously and that we look at what we can do to reduce pedestrian crashes. We know it can be done with Vision Zero. Grand Rapids has done it, and New York City has done it.
All right. I don't recall if that's on our work plan right now for the future, or when the last time was that we had a report on street lighting. But, so we need to look into that, Kayla.
We can add that as a next agenda, under the next agenda items discussion,
Yeah.
as something to be incorporated into the work plan, but it's not currently.
Okay,
There hadn't been a request previously from commissioners to add that.
great. Any other comments? Yes.
I just want to respond, I think, a little bit. I understand that the need for illumination, and I certainly agree that it's something that we need to press on. The data point that I keep coming back to, though, the primary data point when it comes to pedestrian and vehicle crashes is vehicle speed. Every study has shown that the faster a car is going, the more likely somebody dies or is critically injured. Illumination is part of that, but speed is absolutely the #1 factor. And road diets are proven to make roads safer and for cars to go slower. It doesn't necessarily impact travel time. I just want to share, and I'll try to provide the study for others. When I was in graduate school, I was doing a study on the perception of road diets on Ingersoll Avenue in Des Moines, which was a very controversial early road diet. Almost everyone was against it, including business owners don't want it. Residential folks don't want it. Commuters don't own it, don't want it. They did a study a year later, and business was more productive. People were happier. They asked, let's keep this and see what road we can do next. There's a perception that road diets are going to ruin quality of life when all the data shows they improve it. And that's what the experts are relying on. What is the level that vehicle traffic is going through? I don't understand why council is now going to second guess years of data and expertise that has been built to address some of our traffic concerns.
Are we about, okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that there are some benefits to road diets, and I'm not someone who is generally against road diets. And even if you don't take into consideration speed and pedestrians, road diets significantly decrease vehicular rear-end collisions because you've got the left turn lane in a dedicated lane and it's not in the high-speed lane. So I think in terms of education, that's another point that you can make about the value of road diets.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Eric, now it's green. Again, as a representative from AAA TA, again, we support the whole concept of road diets. Again, through even my personal experience working in Des Moines for a number of years, I know the value of them. But as this, our response isn't talking about the merits of road diets, or that council isn't saying necessarily that no to road diets, and it really is on political, on really the political process of it. I'll be abstaining from voting on this. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any abstentions?
Oh, I could abstain, I guess, since I'm on council.
If you,
Either way.
okay, we, 2, 3 abstentions? Kathy, which are you doing?
Abstaining.
Okay. So 3 abstentions.
So 2 abstentions. Matt Webb, thank you for your comment, but as a non-voting member, we don't have to record non-voting members' abstentions.
Okay.
But
You're right.
Sanderson and Griswold have abstained.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have to get my computer to open up. Next item on the agenda is the State of Michigan crosswalk law. And we have Councilmember Griswold and myself as listed. This is just an update. And I think actually that Robert has better information than I do about this. But Kathy, if you want to start, just an update as to where that is.
Yeah, I don't have an update, so maybe
Okay.
Robert knows where it is.
The new and current version of it, who would you have sponsoring it?
None of those decisions have been made. It hasn't come out of legislative services yet.
And I've stated before that once it gets to the Legislative Service Bureau, it might take a week, it might take a month, it might take a year. There's no way to predict that. I just know as of half an hour ago, it has not been introduced as a bill.
Okay, so we can just monitor that and pay attention, and know that if it does come up, and particularly if there's any language, then we would like to address that. The question would be if we want to proactively make a statement, and Kayla researched this and found out that we can recommend to city council that they make a recommendation to the state legislature, but it's not, am I saying this correctly? It's not appropriate for us to go to the state legislator and say, this is what we want. And so if this commission would like to do that in the near or far future, then we can, and particularly choosing a month where we don't have a lot of other stuff on the agenda. But I feel like we just addressed it in April. We don't necessarily need to do it in June. Is that what we'd like to do? I'm seeing some nods.
Yeah, until there's an
I just
actual-
have a question. So you're saying that when it gets to committee, that members of the Ann Arbor community would be discouraged from
No,
Okay.
just this commission.
this commission?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, council did adopt a statement a couple meetings ago
Last meeting.
that talked about our state agenda, and one of them was propose, advance, and advocate for a uniform statewide crosswalk statute that reflects best practices and optimizes the safety of all users. So that's what council has done.
Okay.
And I know that the mayor has directed Kirk Profit to, who's our lobbyist, to aid in that process.
Yeah, I think that where this commission would speak would be specifically to what triggers a stop. That's what we've had strong feelings about in 2 votes so far. So we can put that into the future.
Yeah, until there's actual language to look at, there's no point on further consideration, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Okay.
So we'll keep it as a potential future agenda item, waiting to see what the language is once this comes out of committee. Is that correct?
Once it comes out of the Legislative Service Bureau.
Legislative Service Bureau. And then this commission could potentially make recommendations to city council, so that's correct. It sounds like council has it on their policy agenda, but I think to Linda Diane's point, if there are more specific things beyond the statement about it complying with best practices, but specific language that you would like to see in a statewide crosswalk law, then that's something you would recommend to city council, and then council would decide whether the policy agenda committee take that up, is the way I understand it.
I think that's accurate. All right. And then, the next agenda after that, agenda item is the Scioto Church Service Drive traffic calming update. And we do have possible resolutions on each of these to support the traffic calming devices on each of these roads, which would be Scioto Church, Green Road, Traverwood, and Earhart.
So it's actually traffic calming devices on Scioto Church Service Drive, and then the Green, Traverwood, and Earhart are the road diet lane reduction
Okay,
projects. So that's a little bit separate, but similarly, all of these have resolutions that are planned to go to city council, and those were provided in your agenda materials, the draft council resolutions. And what we're asking is that the commission take an action to say whether you support these, the council approval of these resolutions. As the advisory body to city council on transportation, we think that's an appropriate role. So the first one, I think I gave myself 2 minutes to give you a very quick update about Scioto Church traffic calming. So Scioto Church is the Scioto Church Service Drive petitioned for traffic calming and went through, they were our first project area to go through the newly updated traffic calming program. And we held 2 public meetings with the neighborhood. I believe one was in February and one in March. And then the process is that the final plan that's developed through the process, which you see on the screen in front of you, 2 speed humps and 1 raised crosswalk, that then is sent out to all of the addresses in the project area. There are 11 addresses in this project area. And they're asked whether they support the implementation of this plan, yes or no. And there were 3 responses out of 11. And the program criteria require that at least or greater than 50% of the responses received support implementation. And 100% of the responses received supported implementation. So this is intended, the next step after your commission action here tonight is that this would go forward to city council for their consideration, and they would need to approve a resolution prior to this being constructed. Yep. Any questions?
Can I just move to approve, or
yes,
so moved?
Seconded.
okay. Is there a further discussion?
Where the crosswalk is, and it looks like it's a raised table for the crosswalk, is there a street light in that area? Because I see existing street lights are labeled further to the west, but I don't see a street light identified at the crosswalk.
Yes, my understanding is that anytime we're installing new crosswalks, we are putting in requests for accompanying streetlights. Now, these would be probably on the DTE network, and so we have to run them through their process. So sometimes there's a little bit of a lag between when we put in, the crosswalk and when DTE gets around the, getting the lights up. But yeah, that would be part of the, if this project gets approved by council, lighting would be part of it as well.
Great.
It just might not be at the same time.
Right, because we can't control DTE's schedule, so it's hard to synchronize that.
But we can try and influence it.
Yeah. And we do. We try.
Great, and you can follow through and make sure that it happens. Any other discussion? Yes.
I'm just curious, this is just a design question. I like the tabletop crosswalk treatment. I think those do a really good job of signaling to drivers that they're entering a different kind of space and to behave differently. And they also signal that pedestrians have priority by keeping the grade even for pedestrians and forcing the drivers to change grade, which I like. I'm just curious if it had been considered on the other end of the block, or if there's a reason that this end of the block was appropriate for that treatment and the other end wasn't.
Suggesting a raised crosswalk where device number 1 speed hump is, to, or,
At South
Right,
Seventh.
yeah. I'm just curious if that
Oh.
had come up and whether that had been considered or not. It's more of a curiosity than a strong recommend, but I'm wondering.
I don't think it came up at all. I was at both of the public meetings, and I don't remember discussion of a raised crosswalk there. Is there a stop? So I think that crosswalk, is that at a stop sign probably, because there's a stop bar there? And typically, you probably know better than me, Raymond, but we don't install raised devices at a stop sign because of people are typically already stopping at the stop sign, is in theory. And so that spacing it a little past where they would be stopped would then slow them down like further into the path. There's a better explanation that the traffic engineers usually give about why we don't do and I haven't heard it in a while, so it's not on
Sure.
top of my mind, but there's usually some response about not installing them at stop signs.
Yeah, that sounds plausible to me. I might have quibbles with that, the basis
Yeah.
there, but I think there's probably a plausible reason from the engineering perspective that that's the standard in the US, yeah.
Well, and I'll offer maybe a different explanation, because we do have in the toolkit raised intersections, which is kind of accomplished as a similar type of effect. This petition qualified based on speed. I think those of you that remember from the presentation, the 85th percentile, I think the posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour here, and the 85th percentile was over 30. And I think the idea was really trying to, before cars really pick up the speed. And so as they're just turning in at that location, I suspect maybe that's why it wasn't contemplated by the engineering staff. I didn't follow this process quite as closely, but I suspect that might be one of the contemplations as to why the traffic calming devices were placed further a bit to the east as opposed to right there at that intersection. It was really, again, to address the speeding concern that we heard from the residents along the service drive.
Thank you. Ready to vote? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Then it has passed, one abstention. And then we have the lane evaluation projects update. We can do these as a group or individually.
As a group works.
As a group works, I hear. So I'll take a motion to that effect. So moved, okay, seconded by,
Questions?
great. Discussion,
Oh, so this is the three, yeah, the one question was on the Earhart one, there's these lines with the arrows that I was wondering, I know it's like, I was told by staff that you can't, it's like no, like saying like no motorists can go there. Just forgetting the exact phrasing, but I'm just wondering, because it looks like in parts of it, those lines take up half the road, and I'm wondering, is that actually how it's gonna look, and what's going on there?
did you have a little presentation that you wanted to do on this, Kayla, that might clarify that?
Raymond is going to speak
Okay.
briefly about these and give a little overview of the three.
may answer your question.
They are open.
Yeah, the transverse markings, that's the phrase I was looking for.
All right. So, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Raymond Hess. So you may recall we presented on the traffic calming ideas and concepts back in February and kind of gave an idea of some of the things that staff was looking at, presented some of the data. Then those, as we understood it, were fairly favorably received by this commission. And so that started us down the path of going out and getting public comment, public feedback. So the 3 resolutions that are before you today that we hope to take before City Council are for Earhart Road, Green Road, and Traverwood. So just at a high level, I'll go through each one of them individually. From Earhart, the project entails reducing the number of vehicular travel lanes from 4 lanes to 2, adding roundabouts at the intersections of Earhart Glacier and Earhart Walden Woods / Green Hills, and then adding buffered bicycle lanes and improved crosswalks throughout the project. So the issue that Commissioner Hull has brought up is, and I can see if, whenever you're on a different system, yeah, you can see the, oh, here we go, we can zoom maybe here. So for those of you familiar with Earhart, it's kind of a large boulevard-style roadway where you have, the road widens out. You have 2 lanes, which are bifurcated by a median, and then another 2 lanes. Looking at the data, it looked like the road really only had the amount of vehicle traffic that 1 lane could support, the amount of vehicle traffic that was on there. So the question becomes, how can we repurpose that vehicular travel lane that, for something else? And so the transverse markings that you see here with what we call chevrons, kind of the arrows, that's meant to provide kind of that buffer for the bicycle lane. So the bicycle lane is up along the curb line, and then the white buffer area is really meant to provide kind of some added comfort and, added protection for the cyclists that are, operating in the bicycle lane. This would be considered a buffered bike lane as opposed to a fully protected bike lane. The project does entail or proposes putting in some delineators. Those are those kind of plastic bollards at key parts of the project area. So they would be kind of at the beginning of the buffer area, but it wouldn't be every chevron that you see there. It would just be as vehicles approach to help, identify where the bike lane really kind of goes. And then there would be delineators around the roundabouts as well. So I can just, you can see some of the delineators are marked. I know it's kind of hard to see on the graphic, but let's see if I can zoom in again. Where did my zoom go? Nope. Anyway, if you can see the little black dots are meant to represent where those delineators would be. We have also added where crosswalk lighting would be included as part of the project as well. So that's the Earhart project. It's largely remained the same aside from some slight modifications from what we presented to you back in February. I can pause there. If you have any specific questions about Earhart, we can go over those, or I can continue to go through and highlight some of the others as well.
Kathy?
Yeah, one of my concerns is that we have further south on Earhart, I believe it's 3 school crosswalks without any illumination at this point. And it's outside the range of this project. But my priority would be to illuminate crosswalks before moving on. And then the last time I saw this, there weren't positive contrast light posts at all the crosswalks, but are you saying that the project now has them?
Yes.
Okay.
As
good.
proposed, yeah. All right.
All right.
Okay, next I'll move on to green.
I wanted,
oh.
yeah, I just was wondering, because it looks like those arrows and stuff, like, it looks like at some parts, the arrows are bigger than the actual bike lane, or almost as big as the travel lane. Is that in fact the case, and is there a reason for that?
Yeah, it's really a function of how much roadway we are working with, right? So, first normally what we do is we start with the vehicular travel lane, figure out how much room we need for that, and then how much room do we need for the bicycle lane, and then kind of reallocate the rest of the remaining space. So, there is an opportunity to make the bike lane a little bit wider. There is engineering guidance that you don't want bike lanes to become too wide because then you run the risk of people actually driving in them, right? And so the idea of kind of these marked out areas, or what we call gored out areas, is really to help give a clear visual cue to both motorists and cyclists for that part as well, that this is kind of a not to be driven in, not to be ridden in. It's really meant to be kind of a buffer between the two modes of transportation. So you'll see that they kind of fluctuate, right? I mean, even in the graphic that you see before you, this part, you can see they get a little skinnier towards, the far end of the project, and they start to widen out a little further to the other side, and that's just a function of how much pavement is out there.
All right, Scott.
So is it fair to sort of presume that down the line, when this segment of road eventually is up for a larger reconstruction kind of project, that assuming these kinds of things are considered successful and working well, or we've tweaked them a little bit where they haven't been, that might lead to sort of a more permanent reconfiguration?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. Earhart is a little bit different than the other two because Earhart is really a test case. Earhart is scheduled for resurfacing in 2021, I believe. It's spelled out in the resolution. And what this is really meant to be, this is, to use a term of art, the tactical urbanism, right? So the idea is here with just some paint and some plastic delineators, we can do a infrastructure light project where you're really just putting paint and some kind of removable bollards on the road. If if the analysis is wrong and it's not working, then when the road gets resurfaced in 2021, things can be put back the way they are. Conversely, if it shows that it is working, then we can look at a heavier infrastructure improvement. So for example, when you think about the roundabout in particular, the long-term solution would not be just paint and delineators, that you would probably look to some sort of curbing, you would look to, some sort of treatment in the middle of the roundabout. That would be included as part of that resurfacing project. And then the same thing could be true of the curb lines themselves. I will note that when you start touching those curb lines, it starts to affect stormwater and things like that. And so there's a pretty heavy price tag that starts to get associated with those. So, but it's an opportunity for us to look at a more permanent solution if, when the time comes in 2021, if this was approved by council and is successful, to look to see what permanent solutions could be part of the project.
Yeah, and I mean, if it works, like there's a lot of space there that we could get rid of some pavement potentially, which could be nice. Yeah, one point I'll make now, and I don't think it is worth factoring in with this test scenario, especially given relative volumes of people moving through here, but with the roundabout designs, like having the crosswalks pulled back a little bit from the entries and exits tends, like at least from some of the reading I've been doing on roundabout designs, like tends to be much safer than having the crossings right up where vehicles are coming in and out, because they're focusing on what they're doing in the roundabout, because it's a little bit stressful and it's complicated. And so when you add pedestrian and bicycle traffic right there at that junction, it's easier to miss people than if they're a little bit further back, so people are already on their way out and they can see what's in front of them. So that would be my down the line thinking. I think that is a bigger set of projects, because moving crosswalks involves moving sidewalks and has all kinds of right-of-way and easement implications, but it's something
and I think that's a
think
point
about.
really well taken for the long-term solution again, if things move forward and if it's proven to be successful, to bring that into consideration as well, because you picked up on a point. We are utilizing as much of the existing kind of infrastructure as possible, so those existing curb ramps, that existing crosswalk, really those aren't being relocated. In theory, the crossings will be a little bit easier now because you're only crossing one lane of travel at a time, and you have kind of a little bit more space to traverse as opposed to being kind of, having to dash across those two lanes of travel at a time. So hopefully even this kind of interim solution can still be a marked improvement over what's out there today. But then it can still be improved upon as well.
Thank you.
All right.
So let's move on.
All right, next is Green Road. So the project entails reducing the number of and narrowing the vehicular travel lanes and adding bicycle lanes. The one thing I will note is, so based on, we just had the public meeting for Green and Traverwood last week, and we heard, you may recall that the initial concept that was proposed back in February was to keep both northbound lanes and then eliminate the right turn lane in favor of trying to accommodate the bicycle lane, the buffered bike lane up to the intersection. Based on some of the comments we received at the public comment period or the public open house last week, there was a lot of interest in preserving that right turn lane. And so we went back and looked at the data, and actually, based on the volumes of vehicles out there, it looks like we could do the northbound lane to just one lane of travel on northbound Green. Now, that might seem a little counterintuitive because the southbound intersection approach would still have 2 left turn lanes, a through lane, and a dedicated right lane. So it seems a little kind of imbalanced that you have ostensibly 4 lanes on one side of the road with just 1 lane on the other side. But if you think about kind of the pervasive movements of especially vehicles out there, everyone is really trying to get onto Plymouth and get over to US 23. And really, once you're north of Plymouth, you're really, there aren't a lot of bottlenecks, right? There aren't a lot of things that are really going to slow down traffic. And so the volumes of traffic that are heading northbound really can be supported by just the single lane of travel. In proposing this, we can then achieve kind of what we heard from the public. We can restore the right turn lane, and we can have the buffered bike lane up and through the intersection on Green. It also makes for a better alignment of the bicycle lane if you're southbound to the connecting side south of the road. And so this is something that this draft concept that you see before you is kind of fresh off the presses. We're going to allow people to comment on this because this is a modification based on some of the comments we've heard. Anybody that we've heard from already, we'll let them know of kind of these changes, and we'll give them an opportunity to comment online as well. So I just wanted to let you know that this is something that's kind of relatively new. This is a little bit of a departure from what was presented to you back in February. But again, when we looked at the data, it seemed like it was a way to kind of accommodate all the things that we've been hearing. Any questions about that? Sorry, I should have. Councilmember.
So we're looking at traffic volume right now, and one of my concerns is that we know that Nixon Road has to have major improvements, and when Nixon Road is under construction, Green and Traverwood will be the detour routes. So my preference would be to wait until Nixon Road is completed before we reduce the lanes on Traverwood and Green Road.
Okay. All right.
All right,
Shall I move on to Traverwood?
sure.
All right, so Traverwood is consistent with what we've presented in the past. You may recall that probably the best thing for me to open would be this. It's probably a little hard to see, but again, the concept that was originally proposed was to take the 4 lanes out there now and reduce it to kind of a 3-lane configuration that would include a bicycle, well actually it would be a 2-lane configuration for vehicles and then 1 northbound lane for bicycles, and to allow for an on-street parking lane. The on-street parking lane serves a couple purposes. One, it's meant to provide a buffer for the sidewalk. It's also meant to be kind of a informal park and ride. We've seen that Here on Parkway North, up near Nixon, there's some on-street parking that's placed up there, and a lot of people are, instead of parking in the neighborhoods and using the ride facilities, they're using that, which we feel is kind of a win-win. And so we think that a similar thing can be achieved here on Traverwood. Now, we did get a lot of comments on, the desire to have a bike lane on both sides, and so this is one of those kind of trade-offs. Which facility type is kind of the most desirable? Is it that on-street parking, or is it that bike lane? We're still proceeding with the on-street parking with kind of a share the road condition, a share-o for the southbound, but a dedicated bike lane for the northbound. So that's what's being proposed on Traverwood.
So no changes from the last time we saw this?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one concern, and I would think it's going to decrease safety, and that is we're removing the protected parking that's cut in, and we're creating on-street parking instead. And that library has many family and activities for children, and so many of the occupants of those cars are going to be young children, and they're going to be getting out directly into the lane of traffic. And so if we're really committed to Vision Zero, it seems like the safer solution would be to leave the parking where it is, other than maybe widening the road. And the other concern I have is every dollar spent on a change here is a dollar not spent on lighting and a crosswalk with no lighting.
All right. And I assume that those kinds of recommendations are, the project has proceeded way past that at this point.
Well, ultimately, so the resolutions that are in your packet are going to council, because it's council's purview to approve whether or not the lane reductions, lane reconfigurations are approved or not. So what we're proposing to you are those resolutions, so that if you wish to provide a favorable recommendation on them to council,
Yeah.
we can include that recommendation when we take it to council. You can either do them one by one in terms of if you feel differently about them, you can do them as a suite. That's entirely at your discretion. So
Right, we just did all three together, so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a question about Traverwood. Can you refresh my memory with the parking? My recollection is that part of the reconfiguration is we're going to get more level ground to the curbside, so it's easier to actually exit a vehicle on the curbside rather than on the traffic side, because right now there's a steep grade. Is that
Right.
yeah. So I think for me, making it easier to actually, like somebody who drives with a child in the car a lot, making it easy to get out of the car on the side away from the street
Right.
is I think a huge win in terms of safety, because if you have to get out on the traffic side because you can't safely get up the grade, then anyway, so.
I was up at the library, and they've actually regraded it, so it is possible to get out on both sides of the car now. So it looks like they did a pretty good job. They used to have a very steep sort of slope with a lot of rocks, and the rocks kept rolling down into the street, and that was a mess, and they've cleaned all that up and changed the slope.
Great. Any other questions? Are we ready to vote? The actual resolution suggested by Kayla has a few more details for the Earhart part of the project, which is that the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council approve the resolution to proceed with a road reconfiguration and safety enhancement project for Earhart Road from US 23 to South Waldenwood Drive, and allocate $34,500 from the general fund for improvements associated with the roundabout, which is $100,000. And the other two are just standard. Okay, so that's what we're voting on. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, one opposed. Any abstentions? Great, then we pass. Thank you very much. think you're not supposed to leave yet, Raymond. Because now we come to staff report and updates, and you've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, no pressure.
Well, we have the paper. and
Yes.
Anyone who's watching can subscribe to get this update as well.
Right.
I think we're up to 65 subscribers, in case anybody's interested.
You're up to what?
65 subscribers.
All right. That's on, if you go and Google Transportation Commission, City of Ann Arbor, you'll find our website and you can subscribe there.
Would it be helpful in the interest of time to just highlight which projects which have changes to them and not
Yes.
discuss what the changes are? Okay, so I have those highlighted here. So there are changes to Scioto Church, Main to 7th on page 1. There is updated language on the crosswalk improvements on the top of page 3. At the bottom of page 3, there is updated language about the rectangular rapid flashing beacon installations, RFBs. There is updated language on the top of page 6, which is related to the DDA annual bike parking installations. The road diets that we just discussed, pretty much what I presented to you, I pretty much read from the report, so you have all that. The Fuller crosswalk, there's just some simplified language. There was kind of a big long list before, and that language has been simplified from pages 7 and 8. There's a small update related to the Ann Arbor Station at the top of page 9. There's some updated language related to MDOT coordination on page 9 as well. The traffic calming program submittals reflect what Kayla reported on earlier. The transportation plan update on the bottom of page 9 and top of page 10 have also been updated. And those are the major updates to the report
All
this
right.
month.
That was a
How's that?
whiz through. Any questions or comments about any part of this report? Bradley, you're not? Oh, okay. That may be a first.
This might be a first. This might be a first.
Wow, okay. Okay, then, thank you very much for that. It's extremely helpful. And I have to go back to the agenda. The next item on the agenda then is outstanding commissioner questions, and that was in your packet. I don't think we need to review each of them, but thank you very much for submitting the questions and also the excellent staff responses that we got. I just think we learn more and more. It's fabulous. And I think Brad wrote a note to the city staff saying, is that right?
It
Saying
wasn't
thank
about the
you.
questions, it was about the response to the E's.
Okay.
Saying thank you. Yeah, much appreciated.
All right, any other comments or questions? Of course, we can ask more questions for the city staff if anyone, if it does come up. Nothing? Okay. Great, then we have liaison reports from anybody who is serving as a liaison to the commission. There's a couple of you. It's not required.
Depending on your time, I do have a quick update, if you would like me to give it. I have a couple of slides
Sure.
to show. Okay.
We can ask Scott to report while you're setting up, if that's, I think I saw you wave your hand.
Sorry, I don't have
Okay.
anything this week. Yeah.
We're just glad you're here, so it's,
Wednesday nights are pretty busy.
Yes.
So juggling. Yeah, great. Okay, so I just wanted to go through and just share a couple of things that has been happening this spring in the Ann Arbor Public Schools. The first one is we're really pleased that 2 of our elementary schools, Burns Park and Dickin, were notified that we received one of the Safe Route to School mini grants from the state. And those areas below that, they're going to be instituting in the fall and then throughout this next school year, doing some bike and walk rodeos, some incentive programs in the schools. At Dickin, we're going to be putting in another one of the orange flag crossing programs, and Burns Park is going to be doing some promotions for their walking and biking. So we're really pleased. I'm really trying to get more schools to apply for those each year. A couple of updates on our Safe Route to School program. A2 STEAM, 2 weekends ago, completed a wonderful event at M-City, and they were able to use that to talk to kids about safe bike riding. We had some great people out there. Bradley was out there doing little tune-ups on people's bikes. It was really a cool event. I was really impressed, and I'm hoping we can get more schools out there to hold those types of events. Part of their larger Safe Route to School grant that they have, new bike racks are being installed this spring. We will be at the public hearing to City Council on May 20th when they talk about the sidewalk gap construction on Traver. And they're instituting 3 new locations for their orange flag crossing programs at John A. Woods and Peach and Pontiac Trail just near Arrowwood, and then down at the Barton Drive and Traver intersection. So we will be, the first 2 will be, may have already been done. The third one, we have to do a little bit with Mistig to get a pole in there, so it might be a few weeks yet. Scarlett, we're doing some on-site assessments. Pioneer, we're looking, and we always work with the city very close with these types of things. We're looking at a drop-off plan on the 7th Street side of Pioneer. That tends to be a really busy area, and it's, again, crossing our bus traffic and drop-offs with cars, so we always like to try to separate those. So we're looking at some options. Angel, we just completed OHM completed a site review for us. I will have to say, Steve Deering told me it was the hardest site review he'd ever done. That's a very small property, and it's very tight, and we don't have a lot of options there. The worst thing about it is we have cars that pick up backing up on Washtenaw, so it creates a big challenge for us. So we're looking at some different ideas there. Ann Arbor Open is one of our new schools doing the Safe Route to School program, and they've just completed their parent and their student surveys. And I won't show this now, but if you're interested, this video that BAUD did, they have created a new term, dipping, and they have started a new drop-off and pickup lane along 5th, and one of the parents did this really great video telling other parents to not dip into the pickup and drop-off lanes. We have a new process there, and we're going to institute that at some of our other schools as well. This is Bike and Walk to Work month, and so this past week we had a lot of schools participating. That's a list of them right there. For our bus riding students, we do drop the students off from the buses a few blocks, maybe a little bit longer from the schools. We have volunteer and staff out there to walk in with the kids so that everyone can participate. And this list is growing. I know a couple of schools are even thinking about doing it next week, and so we are really trying to encourage more and more schools each year, and not just 1 day or 2 days a year. But one of the things we're doing with the mini grants, and the schools are doing, Lawton is doing this now, is they're doing once a month, once a week. So we're trying to really get into some of those modes throughout our schools. And that is my last slide, but I just wanted to give a quick update.
Great, thank you. Any quick comments?
I'll just give another shout out to the Leeser family for putting together that video for BA, and it is actually very entertaining. So if you see that link in the presentation and you're interested, give it a watch. And the reconfiguration's been working great. Yeah.
Okay.
A quick add-on for the M-City event with A2 STEAM. It was remarkable. It's the best bike rodeo I've ever done. I've done a lot of them in my time. I don't know the official count, but it had to be 100 kids that I checked their bikes on.
Yeah, it was over 100.
Yeah, it was awesome. In terms of, I see that location as possibly being a partnership that we could do with the city and UM. Think Safety Town, but for older kids. It's superb. It's super fun. It's safe. Everybody had a great time. It seems like one of those where I encourage, if we can get city staff involved along with the school districts and some of our community members, like this might be a coalescing location that we could do some cool stuff with.
Great, thanks. Any communications from commissioners?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge this could be my last transportation meeting. It has been a real privilege to be on this commission for the last couple of years. I'm thankful for getting to know all of you. And that's really all I have to say.
Thanks for your service. I appreciate it. Anyone else?
No, I'll let you go first, Scott.
Yeah, I'll echo the sentiment. It's been a privilege to work with you all. I feel like we're just starting to get on our feet as a commission, and I'm a little bit sad that it's going to potentially take a little even more time to kind of get back up to speed, losing potentially three of the members. But there's good people at this table, and I have confidence that we'll continue to do great work in the city. I also just wanted to recognize that while we were in this meeting tonight, there was a silent bike ride to remember people who died on our streets riding their bikes. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I would have been there if this meeting hadn't happened tonight.
All right. Okay.
Can we express our dismay about what's happening? Is this a moment to do that?
Yes,
Okay.
given the confusing information.
Yes. So I would like to express my utter dismay at what appear to be political attacks on volunteers who have dedicated their time and energy to serving our city, and I think have done a tremendous job in their service from what I've seen in my time on this commission. Volunteers to these commissions are appointed because of their expertise and their experience relevant to a given issue. I'm really concerned that requiring them to hold certain views in order to serve their city is undemocratic and destructive to the roles of these commissions. I am further concerned about the lack of transparency and how this is transpiring. It's not clear to me why, well, I mean, I have guesses, but it has not been made clear as to why these four commissioners are not being renewed. I'm concerned about the future effectiveness, particularly of this commission, losing, as others have said, both our chair and our vice chair, and a third very active member, all of whom are really experienced leaders and have, I think, done a great job to get this commission going and kept it running smoothly and effectively. I'm also concerned about the implications for current and future commissioners. So politicizing these roles is going to have a chilling effect on participation in this commission and in other commissions. And it's going to reduce the ability of the commissions to fulfill their missions, and it's going to reduce democratic participation in the running of the city. So I hope those council members who are declining to renew these commissioners will change their positions, and I'm going to find other ways to make this statement in the next week. Thanks.
Okay,
I think Tim has his hand up. I wouldn't mind speaking at some point. But.
okay.
Yeah, I kind of want to concur with all this. I've just been disappointed that 3 of our members are not being reappointed. I feel
But we
like-
don't know exactly
It's
what's
not for
happening.
sure.
Oh, well, I'm hearing that,
Right.
there's a chance that 3 of our members may not be reappointed, and I concerns that, I have not heard why this is. I have my suspicions. There's been very little information. I feel like we're not gonna really know until the council meeting, and then, yeah, it's just, I do hope, I understand if there's like a desire to have, say, more professional engineers on this commission or something. I feel like if they wanted to add more spots for that, that might be okay, but I feel like, I just hope this isn't political. I fear it is, and I feel like this commission is just losing a chair and a vice chair and another member as well. It's just gonna decapitate the commission or just in taking away its leadership, and I hope this council members who have talked about this will reconsider, and yeah, I know that nothing has happened yet. Sorry for misspeaking earlier, but people have heard this, and yeah, I just hope that this commission stays as it is, and continues to thrive, and so.
All right.
I just want to share some thoughts that I sent by letter form to multiple council members, as well as by personal phone call to a few, and not necessarily on the side that might support some of our members here. The only rationale that I've heard for this decision is to increase the diversity of the representatives on commissions. That's what's been communicated to me anyway. And I think it's commendable, and I think I even support it in many ways. So I want to speak specifically about Linda Diane at this moment and what it means for diversity and on this commission. Not to throw Robert under the bus, and Scott, but, you know, typical white males. If I was up this round, I'd probably be maybe considered as well, you know? But Linda Diane is a woman leading in a field that is dominated by men. She is already in a position that others should respect holistically, without reservation. She is also someone who recently has mobility issues and has an e-bike now due to limited mobility. So she is another level of diversity. She is also a member of our aging population. Sorry, Linda Diane, it's true, right? You're a minority at this table right now, representing a segment of our population that ought to be heard and must be heard at commissions like this. So the rationale that I've heard in terms of diversity, I don't understand how Linda Diane is part of that. If it's part of, she hasn't done a good job, I can't possibly imagine anyone more dedicated. She faced a life-threatening illness, and she missed exactly one of 27 meetings. 27 meetings, and she missed one. Anyone who is, suspect that she hasn't devoted herself to this, completely wrong. The other thing I want to say is that this is my first time serving on a commission like this, my first time involved with politics. I enjoy being here. I think you all see the passion that I have. I don't know how to do what Linda Diane has. She has been an incredible mentor to me. I'm not going to fill her shoes, I can tell you right now. I can't yet. But she has been an incredible mentor who has led this commission with patience and grace and an incredible amount of knowledge. And anyone who would say, oh, she shouldn't continue, I don't understand. I honestly don't understand. You're going to have to explain it to me, because I'm not going to get past that it's just the way it's going to go. Thank you.
Yeah, I should add one thing. I had heard at caucus that one of the reasons cited was a concern about diversity of thought. Take what you may from that.
Kathy?
I can't speak on behalf of all the council, but I can speak for myself, and I have spoken in support of Linda Diane. I agree with what's been said. I am confident that Linda Diane will be here next month. I really wish that we had a better way of communicating, because there's been a lot of miscommunication and a lot of energy and emotion that I feel could have been better used to solve problems. And there is another serious issue right now, and that is the fact that Vivian Chang, who serves on the Human Rights Commission, her name will not be brought forward for reappointment. And so there's two sides to these issues. And if anyone on the commission or in the public would like to speak to me about this issue, I'm more than willing to do that.
So that maybe, okay.
I just want, really briefly, I'm shocked and confused about what's happening here, but if you three aren't reappointed, I just want to thank you so much for all you've done. You're all founding members, I believe, of the Transportation Commission. You've accomplished a lot, and I'm shocked and confused, and I hope that you will be reappointed.
We'll know more Tuesday morning. So that's probably enough about that subject. Any other messages from commissioners? Then we need to, yes.
I don't know if this is the right time, but I would like to suggest another topic in this, for a future meeting, and this relates to.
That's the next agenda item.
Oh.
Is what's on the agenda for next time. Yes. Go ahead.
To follow up on the research I've been doing with the 6 E's on evaluation, I would like to propose that we have a built-in feedback loop. So when we make roadway changes, there is an automatic evaluation that's done at an appropriate time, and I'd have to defer to the engineers whether that would be 6 months, 12 months. But
Okay,
just the
so if
feedback
you,
loop.
if you prepare something in conjunction with that proposal, that would be, we
Okay.
can put that on the future agenda. Any other future agenda items? All right, and of course, it's an open topic, so you can contact us. The agenda-setting meeting is scheduled for the first Friday in June, and we'll see what happens. So if there's no objections, I'm going to go ahead, go ahead.
I'll just, quick announcement that the work plan shows the CIP update, and that is planned. I've talked with Deb Goslin, and she's come to the commission the last few years to present the CIP information, and we're on track for that. And transportation plan update is plugged in on our work plan, and I'll follow up with Eli to see if he'll have something ready at that point. I think also worth mentioning related to transportation plan update is that the Community Advisory Committee is kicking off, and it's my understanding that Linda Diane will be the representative of the Transportation Commission on that.
Right, which might be reconsidered, but who knows?
At this point, we'll move forward with that.
Okay.
And just announcement, our next meeting will take place on Wednesday,
Yes.
June 19th at 7:00 PM here in council chambers at City Hall.
Great. So just in case I don't get another chance to use it, we're adjourned.